Bienvenidos a un capítulo más de Diálogos Sensoriales. En esta ocasión tengo el enorme placer de entrevistar a una gran amiga ya por mucho tiempo, compañera de conferencias y pues vamos a viajar ahora virtualmente a Estados Unidos, en particular a Houston. Así es que démosle la bienvenida a Lisa. Lisa, thank you very much for accepting this interview and for sharing us your experience and let's say situations in sensory evaluation.
Yeah. Well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And lo siento, mi amigo, my español es terrible. So we're going to have to continue primarily in English.
No problem, no problem. Sometimes it's better to do this because it's more it can reach more people in fact. So thank you again, and let's start with a curiosity question. Why and how did you arrive into sensory evolution?
Yeah, so kind of by accident is how it happened. I started my career in product development for
Mhm.
Colgate-Palmolive.
Okay.
Many years ago. Please don't ask me how many years ago. And I worked in product development, and I went to school at night, and I got a MBA while I was working and studying.
Mhm.
Um, and I took an assignment in marketing for about 6 months. It was a temporary assignment. And coming back from that temporary assignment, one of the vice presidents said to me, "Hey, how do you feel about like another 6 month assignment?" And I'm like, okay,
Okay.
where am I going now?" And at the time it was we called it technology, consumer, sensory, and insights.
Mhm.
And I took a 6 month assignment there that ended up just sparking my interest.
Right. Wow. So let's not speak about the time then. But uh, do you have that time when you realize that this is the thing I want to do or enjoy?
Yeah, so when I got into the role, so when I first got into the role, of course it was overwhelming because I was learning so much. But once I got a little bit more comfortable, they sent me for at the time, and maybe they still do. Rutgers has a great little sensory course that you can take as a professional. I went for that. I did some continuing education. Once I got a little bit more comfortable, I found that working in sensory and consumer insights was a beautiful blend of what I knew from product development,
Mhm.
what I knew from marketing. And I always felt like my job there was to kind of translate between those two groups
Right.
because sometimes in companies, let those two groups speak a little different and they don't always understand each other. And I always felt like my job was to kind of bridge that and
Right.
help build the understanding and work with both of those groups.
Right. And over the years, being let's say a consultant or working in a company, have you seen the evolution of this discipline through your career? How was at the beginning? How is nowadays? What is the difference in that?
So I think it's twofold. For me, it's my evolution. I'm always learning and I love to keep learning. And I think that the other thing that makes sensory science so exciting for me is that it's constantly evolving. You know,
Mhm.
it's a very resilient group, a very creative group of scientists that work in this field. And for example, just watching what happened through the pandemic, how creative everyone was
Right.
to keep work continuing to go with good science too, right? So the
Mhm.
science is always the basis, but watching people be creative about new methods and ways to talk to consumers and ways to get to answer the questions that we have.
Right. In particular, that time it was like a evolution, really fast for sensory. Right. We were like we need to do this in a closed room. We have or we must have air or the conditions, whatever. But now during that time, okay, let's stretch or squeeze a little bit more the sensory science to get the opinion from the panel or for the consumers. And what about the key difference in the let's say in the sensory as working with panel or consumer research? what are the differences despite or beside the consumer and the panel? What about speaking about the methodologies, in fact?
Right. So I spend a lot of time with the consumers because I am primarily a qualitative research consultant. So I
Hmm.
primarily do focus groups, one-on-one interviews, ethnography. That's not done in a vacuum, though, right? A lot of
Hmm.
times there is some quantitative portion that goes along with that so that we can build the understanding. My in my ideal world, you have a little bit of everything, right? You have what panel can answer for you, what
Hmm.
quantitative can answer for you, and what qualitative can answer for you. And I love, or my favorite way to work is starting from the very beginning. What are the questions we need to answer? And how can we approach that? What method or methods do we need to
Right.
use to get all of those answers? So I love sometimes when it's just a whole collaborative process of all three of those things to get to the information that we need to progress the project.
You mentioned collaborative or the collaboration in between departments. How easy is getting that in the day to day? It's fast, it's quick.
So I think it's quicker than it used to be. And I think that it depends on the size of your organization.
Hmm.
Some people have very large organizations that they work in, and they have multiple people that they can rely on for those aspects of a project.
Hmm.
Some of us work in smaller organizations, and maybe you have to outreach a little more, or maybe you have to have a consultant, and that might be a little bit more complicated, but don't I would say don't let that deter you if you think that is the best way to kind of answer the problem. The other thing I love about the sensory community is we're so eager to help each other,
Hmm.
right? And to build on those ideas. If anybody ever has any questions about come to me. I'm happy to answer. Even if you're not having me do the project,
Right.
I'm always happy to answer the questions. And I think that's something that I see throughout our sensory community.
Right. No, that's important. You already also mentioned continuous learning, the collaboration. So how all those areas, like speaking about marketing, consumer insight, product development, uh, work together in order to focus in an actionable consumer research, let's say, in how easy is to get information from marketing or to translate the product development into brainstorming or a focus group session.
Right. And I think it really varies from, in my case, client to client, how those relationships are established. I know from my previous client side days, one of the things I love to do is have a
Mhm.
very good relationship with market research. There's always some overlap, right? Sensory and consumer sciences now, we do that consumer research, so does market research, and really working hand in hand with that group, understanding how to put things together
Right.
with them and have them be a partner is super important. And it may just depend on organization, right? I think sometimes we get lucky and there is a good relationship, and sometimes we have to work to make that relationship.
Right. Do you remember like a challenging project or something that says, okay, this is going to take more time that I thought.
Sure. I can remember one from back in my client side days at Colgate. One of the things that the R&D team was tasked with was um, I worked in the oral care category, portable oral care. What kind of things can we have for kind of on the go? And as you can imagine, the range of things that product development came up with to solve this idea of on the go was broad. And
Mm.
so the big challenge was, how do we present that to consumers? Because they're maybe not connected in any way, the ideas. They're very different. Some of them were very preliminary. So we took an approach where we did some creative consumer work to get some of those prototypes a little closer to consumer acceptance. We
Mhm.
did a series of different consumer tests trying to group things that were similar so that the consumer could kind of pick and choose. So that was very challenging just because there was such a wide array of things to assess and to assess quickly to let research and development know, product development know which direction to go in, which ones to pursue.
In this sense, how sensory changed your life? I mean, your day to day. Because
Yeah.
I might guess that at the very first day you start working, you have like a different perception of the products. But nowadays, you are aware of many things. So, speaking in that way, how sensory changed your life?
Um, wow, it changed it totally and completely because, in my mind I had a certain career path and then I came into
Mhm,
sensory. And from Colgate I ended up going to a supplier of Colgate and then eventually out on my own in terms of consulting. So I think in that way it changed. I never imagined kind of having my own consulting practice. So
mhm,
that was a huge change. And I think it also just changes the way I look at products,
uh,
knowing how much goes into them, not only from the product development side, but also from the consumer. Every touch point that happens with a product, sensory
right.
is involved. How does the package function? How does the package feel in your hand? How does a lotion feel? Like all of those things come down to sensory.
Mhm.
And sometimes when I'm not with my broader sensory family, I have to turn that off because I want to talk about
Right.
the way something tastes or the way something smells, or I'm sharing, and I have to remember not everybody is like that, and to just take a step back and let everybody kind of enjoy on their own.
Right. Wow. Yes. Sometimes it's like, what are you doing? Why don't you enjoy your food and then say yes?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, what is the best part of being a consultant?
So the best part is that every day is different. And also, unlike when I was on the client side, I see such a broad array of products.
Right.
Everything from eyeglasses, sexual health, cannabis, food, beverage, and that keeps me on my toes. That's a
Mhm.
challenge, learning about different product categories all the time. And I love having just something different all of the time.
And who inspired you to do sensory? Uh, you can say at the beginning or nowadays, who inspired you?
So at the beginning, I'm going to say my colleagues at Colgate, they were very accepting to have
Mhm,
me come into the department
mhm,
and to teach me things, to guide me. And then later on, my ASTM family, the E18 group, that was just meeting everyone there, everyone from people that we know from authoring textbooks,
right.
all the way down to all of us. It's just a great collaboration meeting, getting to network with everyone at ASTM. A lot of those people really inspired me to stay in the career and to continue to learn.
For people who is not so aware of the ASTM, what is that?
So ASTM, we have a committee, E18, it's on sensory evaluation. We meet twice a year. You can become a member even if you can't go to the meetings,
Mhm,
and it's relatively inexpensive. That membership gives you access to the current standards. So it's a standard, ASTM is a standards organization. We write standards. The beauty is that that is also a collaborative process. So people have input. Even if you can't come to the meetings, you get to see the standards under development if you're a member and you get to contribute to
mhm.
those. Um, so I think it's a really worthwhile. Like I said, even if you can't always come to the meetings, it's
Right.
great to see kind of what people are working on, maybe even suggest things that could be a good standard. And the standards are very helpful if, you're looking for a new method or maybe you haven't done a method in a while. Um, it's a great teaching tool. There's just so many things that someone can get out of the E18 ASTM.
And it's not only for food. You have
Oh,
other
no,
variants.
no. In fact, there's a whole subcommittee on
Mhm.
non-food. And there's a little something for everybody, really.
Right. So if I am in Chile and I want to contribute or to participate, I'm able to do that.
Absolutely. Also, a lot of we do meet twice a year, and most of those meetings now are hybrid. And so you can join, like we're talking now from a distance, you can
Mhm.
join those meetings virtually and
Nice.
participate as well.
And then you can networking or you can meet people, the authors of those books or guidelines, for instance.
Absolutely. I'll tell
Nice.
you about my very first ASTM meeting. It was a little bit of a faux pas. Because I came to one of the meetings and it was a strategy meeting and for those of you out there, this was before there was an SSP,
Mhm.
right? And so some of the discussions were about should there be, what could that organization be? And it was just a
Right.
very broad kind of strategy meeting. Being new, they kind of asked me what I thought about ASTM. And being new, I had kind of a closed view. I didn't know. I had heard in the past, like, oh, you don't want to go because you're going to end up with a lot of work. And
Right.
boy, they do this and it takes forever. And so I spoke those things. And Ivan, I forgot to really know who was in the room. Let this be a
Yeah,
lesson to
it
young
happens. Yes.
professionals. And then I realized after I opened my mouth who was in the room. And fortunately, they accepted with open arms what I had to say because they were interested.
Right.
But I really thought, uh-oh, they're going to just drag me out of here and I'll never come back.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because sensory people normally is like friendly. I mean, they have been passed for these situations, so they most of them they are aware that you are nervous. This is your first time. Okay. Well, it's like they embrace you, no, normally.
Oh,
So.
and it was, and I just, because I was new,
Uh-huh.
I just didn't know, and I spoke, and then I
Okay.
realized who I was speaking in front of. But like I said, I was embraced and welcomed, and X number of years later, I'm still participating.
Nice. No, I can imagine that time. Good, good. Okay, I will start asking you some preference questions. Just let me
Okay.
know which one do you prefer.
Okay.
Uh, Barbecue or brisket?
Oh. Being in Texas, I don't know how to separate those because brisket is a big part of the
Right.
barbecue.
Okay, I will change it. Barbecue or fajitas?
Oh no, another hard choice. See, this paired preference is how I ended up in qualitative because I'm
Yeah.
that I'm just inherently not good at these because I love both. And really the history of fajitas is Tex-Mex, right?
Right,
Um, wow. I'm gonna have to say fajitas.
right. City or forest?
La Playa, the beach.
Yeah.
It wasn't a choice. See, I'm so
Right.
bad
Yeah,
at
yeah.
this.
But I need to ask sometimes. Tetra testing or triangle testing?
Oh, wow. So the statistics questions are going to cause me some anxiety. I'm going to say it depends on the objective.
Uh-huh.
Probably if time and money are no object, then tetrad.
Okay. Red wine or white wine?
Cerveza? Beer?
Cerveza.
Or tequila?
Should I ask then tequila or mezcal?
Oh, so I don't have enough experience with mezcal, so I'm going to say
Oh,
tequila.
okay. I will take with me next time a bottle of mezcal in order that
Okay.
you can
I
experience
have a
that.
little bit, but
Yeah, it depends. Some are really nasty, but most of them are really nice as well. But let's see.
okay.
Traditional descriptive analysis or rapid methods?
So I happen to love rapid methods, and I'll tell you why. There is absolute I like traditional descriptive is a core thing for sure. You need to have it. I love rapid methods because sometimes some of those methods can be adapted for qualitative, sensory qualitative, right? So I
Mhm.
can bring something in like a sorting exercise or napping or something that might be considered some type of rapid profiling
Right.
and let my naive consumers do it.
Okay. Meat or seafood?
Seafood,
Parametric or non-parametric statistics?
parametric,
Preference mapping or PLS?
preference mapping.
Okay, thank you for your answers. Okay, let's move to the final part of the interview. Time flies. I can
It,
imagine.
I, and this is how I feel about focus groups. Like I have
Uh,
a whole discussion guide, and it seems like I've got so, and then it's like, oh, I have to wrap. I have to
yes, yes.
time.
But of course we can do another session. We can do it with beer and fajitas. Why not? And describe, make a consumer evaluation. That's just like cross-cultural preferences.
Yeah, I watched one of the videos, and of course, my Spanish is horrible, but you were making pozole.
Yes, pozole.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah, and it was so fun to kind of see. And I was trying to pick up little, but yeah, I
it.
would love it. It would be so fun.
Yes, well, we can do it next time. Why not? Because in that video we are trying to explain. We call it raíces sensoriales, which is the roots of sensory, and we describe products
Mm,
in a consumer way. That's my role, like a sensory people. That's Viviana, and with a specialist that can be a
mm.
chef, can be I don't know, maybe a sommelier or whatever
Mm.
that can give their insights. So thank you for watching that.
Oh
And
yeah, and I think that's so good because, in my qualitative life, I have talked to chefs,
mhm,
sommelier, and their language and their approach to sensory can be very helpful,
right,
right? And
right,
so I love that bridge of, especially if you work in food and beverage. Of course, it doesn't apply to all, but in food and beverage, that can be super, super helpful because they have a lexicon
right. Yes, yeah, yes,
potentially that can be very helpful. So for those of you that are in the food and beverage, don't shy away from some of those experts and learning some of that lexicon. It can help with the development.
right, correct. That's the idea. And in a short future, we will put some artificial intelligence in the captions, so you will be able to understand better the videos. So, but it's
For me,
time
it's
consuming.
helpful. So if any of you run into me at a conference and you want to help me with my Spanish, please, por favor.
Perfect.
I love
Nice.
it.
You just
Yeah.
mentioned. You'll see. Okay. So next Pangborn, you will be very like busy with this let's say Latin people trying to communicate with you in Spanish.
Perfecto. Perfecto.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Um, are there any sensory or what I mean consumer testing methodologies that you find particularly effective or challenging when you apply that into, let's say, fragrances or versus food?
So I think with fragrances versus food, consumers do have a decent lexicon around food, right? As children, we kind of experience food and we start to learn what we like and we don't like, and we get to be a little bit descriptive.
Mhm.
I think sometimes with fragrance, we don't always build that consumer lexicon around fragrance. So I think sometimes it's a little more difficult for consumers to talk if they haven't been trained. They know what they like and they know what they don't like, but they might not give you all the descriptors you're looking for. So it could be a little challenging, a little more challenging considering fragrance over, say, flavors in food.
Okay, so if you can say which category is the most challenging or more or less explored, let's say, which one will be that?
That's more challenging. I think the fragrances are definitely more challenging. Like I said, people know what they like and don't like. So getting their acceptance is easy.
Mhm.
but having them potentially describe what it is that they liked or didn't like about a particular fragrance could
Mhm.
be difficult.
Okay, okay. With this experience with brainstorming or focus session, how easy is to get the consumer insights in order to guide the innovation process? Is that
Yeah.
easy?
So no, it's not. It's not easy. Uh, it, it takes a lot of work. And like I said, I think I said earlier about that collaborative process. Really understanding the objectives and what you're hoping to learn can be very helpful. That's
Mhm.
always the one thing when I meet with a client. I want to know what is the overall objective, and then the next question I ask is, when you get this information, what are you going to do with it? Right. So what we have this, what did we ask? And now what are we going to do with this information that we have it? And that helps me kind of develop a guide, dig into the questions, knowing that, hey, we're going to evaluate these prototypes. We want to narrow them down, but we also want to give guidance to product development, right?
Mhm.
So when I hear that guidance to product development, that means I want to dig into the sensory attributes of kind of the lead prototypes that come forward, right? So that's very helpful in the conversation.
Right. What advice will you give to these people who are into qualitative area? They are like, okay, what I need to be aware if I am going to make this kind of research.
Right. So, if you have the ability to have a qualitative researcher guide you and help you, that's very helpful. If you have the ability to take any kind of training in qualitative research, even if you don't intend to moderate,
Mhm.
right? Even if you never intend to moderate one focus group, it's very helpful to have that training to understand what goes into it,
Right.
right? To just kind of have a feel for how the process goes. Um, if you don't, there are some good books and resources out there. And also tap into your sensory community because there are a lot of us that do moderate. We're more than happy to give you some guidance and help you. Um, First and foremost, just like any quantitative study, right?
Mhm.
We want to make sure we're talking in a qualitative study. You want to make sure you've got the right people that you're talking to, and you want to make sure that you've got a clearly defined objective. And from there, you want to make sure that you have the questions that you need to ask. I always look at my discussion guide as potentially an outline for the report that's going to go to a client, right? And so in that outline, did I address all the questions that we need to address? So that's just a good check if you're new to qualitative. Does the discussion guide kind of hit all of those points?
Mhm. So what will be the minimum skills for that person? Let's say if they're just coming out from the school, what will you look or suggest them to develop?
So some interviewing skills, right? And again, there might be some good resources online. If you can do training, REVA, which is Research in Values and Attitudes, has exceptional training. I believe Burke Institute has some training. My apologies, I don't know what's available in Spanish along those lines. But I'm sure there's an equivalent to that. Um, and a lot of practice. I'm going to tell you, even after I had my training.
Right.
Nothing prepares you like just doing.
Right.
And so I also recommend start small. Start with one-on-one interviews because it's just you and one other person. You don't have to manage any kind of group dynamics, and it's a good way to kind of get your feet wet. And then, slowly expand what you're doing, but just keep doing it and it'll get more and more comfortable. The other thing I tell people to do is to get very comfortable with silence.
Right.
One of the most effective things I can do as a qualitative researcher is just be quiet.
Hmm. Interesting.
We as humans like to fill that empty space. And if I give the consumers the space, they will fill it for me.
Right. Yes. You need to be patient as well.
And I know 10 seconds or 15 seconds seems like a lifetime, but
Right.
get very comfortable with it. And eventually, I'll tell you, I had an experience and it was interesting because I was speaking to Hispanic consumers.
Mhm.
I am not Hispanic. They can tell, right? And we're talking about a product in the US that's a mass market product. And all of a sudden, everyone is very quiet. And I sat in that silence for a little bit. And I said, everyone is very quiet. What is it that you are hesitant to tell me?
Wow.
And then they started laughing. And they started laughing and they told me that, hey, this product, this mass marketed product, this is really for the gringos, not for us. But they were hesitant to tell me because of what I bring.
Right.
You know who I am, right? They were a little hesitant to tell me. But letting them sit in that silence, me sitting in that silence, we found out. I could have kept going. We would have never found out. They might have never admitted that this is not a
Correct.
product for them,
Right.
even though it's a quote unquote product marketed for Hispanics in the US. It wasn't a product they considered authentic or something that they would typically go for.
Wow. Yes. Interesting. Yeah. So people tend wants to speak, but you need to get the first, let's say, string in order that they can speak a lot.
Right,
Okay.
exactly, exactly.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Do you have a book, paper, poster, or something that you can suggest to the people who is looking at this video?
Yeah. So I always recommend ASTM E18 standards, guides, manuals. There's just a treasure trove of information there. I could recommend the standard books out there, Gail's book. I'm sure there's more that just aren't coming to my mind, but the standards are great because they're ever evolving and ever changing. So that would be one of my first go-to places. Um, and then if you're not a book person, again, there's a beautiful sensory network. There's a beautiful community of people that, they don't have to divulge anything proprietary, but you can go to them with your questions. And I think we talked about it before, Ivan. This community is very eager to help and to
Yes.
support. And so put your question out there, see what happens.
Yep. There will be somebody that want to ask you,
Right.
answer you. Sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah. 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 Great. Finally, Elisa, let's say you have a time machine and you are able to travel directly at the exact point during your first day doing sensory. Is there something you can tell to Lisa?
Wow. Yeah, just embrace it. Don't be nervous. Just go for it. Ask the questions. Just keep asking the questions, right? Nobody can be an expert on their first day, so don't be afraid. Don't shy away from those questions, even if they seem basic to you. There's sometimes there's a benefit
Mhm.
in having it all explained to you and going through it.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, important. Lisa, thank you so much for your time. We need to finish this interview. I really appreciate your time and
Yeah,
your
my pleasure. This was fun. I was a little anxious, but this was fun. I'm
yeah,
used
yeah.
to I'm used to having all the questions.
Okay, one time different.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, and I hope I can see you at Philly, I guess.
I'm hopefully not
Okay,
100%, but I'm hoping. Yes.
okay. So we can record a video there if you wanted, like
Oh,
some taste
yeah.
experience.
Okay. Sounds
No,
good. Bueno,
perfect. Okay,
perfecto.
thank you so much. Something else you want to add?
No, I think that's everything. Look forward to seeing everybody at conferences and yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Lisa. See you next time then, and that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Eh,
you.
Bye. A ustedes muchas gracias por vernos. Si les gustó, denle click en like y compartan. Si no, simplemente no digan nada. Nos vemos en la siguiente. Chao, chao. Bye.